Thank you. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman Menendez, and thank you, all three of you, for your service and for your work to continue to help lead the efforts of our administration in combating Russia's aggression in Ukraine. I thought the recent decision taken jointly by the United States, Germany, and a number of other NATO allies and European partners, soon to be NATO allies, to send main battle tanks as well as to send Bradleys and Strykers from our Department of Defense was the right one. I'm assuming, if I might, that this was not factored into your supplemental request last year. And on behalf of the DOD, and if anyone else wants to speak, fine. But what impact does it have on available resources for this new commitment to have made? And are there any additional resources or assistance required to meet the additional requirements, both security and non-security, of deploying Abrams?
Thank you, Senator. The DOD has a very focused process in preparing PDA packages and USAI packages in light of what the Ukrainians prioritize, what our assessment is that they require as well, what the readiness impacts are, and what the costs are, and deliverability of the capabilities are. So while you are correct that the specific capabilities of the last couple of weeks were not previewed necessarily in the original supplemental, the scope of the supplemental, for which we are grateful, does accommodate this planning and ongoing planning. That does not preclude that we may need to come back to request additional funding, but for now we are in a very good place for that deliberate planning and constant provision of capability to Ukraine.
Well, I think it's a positive step forward that complements the Bradleys and Strykers that were already announced. I do think it's important for us to ensure that the assistance made possible by the $45 billion supplemental appropriations at the end of last year is used as intended, that any misuse is identified and addressed. I've raised these issues directly with President Zelensky last week, with the Deputy Prime Minister, the Mayor of Kyiv, with a number of legislators from Ukraine, also with our team in Kyiv when I visited in November. We provided significant additional resources through the state and foreign operations appropriations provisions for both USAID and state OIGs. I think enhanced oversight is a good idea. I'd be interested whether, Ms. Newland, you might describe whether you think the accountability and oversight mechanisms currently in place have been effective, and what, if anything, we need to do to strengthen them, and if I might also, Ms. Wallander.
Thank you, Senator Coons, for your attention and support for all of this. As I mentioned earlier, we have a layered approach on the civilian side. As you know, we have extra staff, thanks to you and the embassy, who are focused on accountability. We have the budget support that is the bulk of the economic support funds goes through the World Bank, so they actually pay the salaries, et cetera, that we are intending to support, and is double monitored by Deloitte. We also have, as you said, all of our OIGs are very, very active. In fact, all three of them, State, AID, and the Department of Defense, as we sit here, they are on the ground in Kyiv now doing their first look at all of this. And I won't speak for my colleagues, but when I was in Kyiv in December, I got a very intensive brief from the military about how they're accounting for every single artillery shell. It's quite impressive.
So did I in November, and I found it constructive. I just think it's important for our colleagues to get as much of this as we possibly can. I have just a minute left. If either of you'd like to speak briefly to it.
Thank you, Senator. I wanted to add to, in addition to what Undersecretary Newland mentioned vis-a-vis the reimbursement process for direct budget support through the World Bank and verifying through third-party monitoring that those arrears that we are covering are valid. We also entered into, just last month, an interagency agreement with the GAO that is going to work with the financial systems and the Ministry of Finance, of course, in Ukraine to strengthen their own audit capability and with their Supreme Audit Authority to make more robust their internal controls as well. And so we are moving out and expanding both our internal capacity building as well as third-party monitoring and oversight.
Thank you. I'm near the end of my time. I have another colleague waiting. I'll just comment that I'm glad to see the administration's decided to sanction the Wagner Group. I'm very concerned about the scope and reach of their impact. During the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, we pulled together a meeting of 5 coastal West African national leaders who expressed grave concern about their stability and security. And I think Russia's malign actions are not limited to Ukraine by any extent, and I'm concerned about a number of countries in Africa, which I'd be happy to work with you further on. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Kane.
Let me go to another part of the world. I have questions for Secretaries Nuland